Don't Look Back. The movie is prepared with financial support of the Agency of State Support for Non-Governmental Organizations of Azerbaijan Republic. The content of the movie is under obligation of the presentation of Armenian Aggression Public Union and consequently doesn't express the position of the Agency of State Support for Non-Governmental Organizations of Azerbaijan Republic. Don't Look Back. Khojaly city the day before occupation. Me, Nasirov Ramiz Kamaloglu, was born in Khankendi. In 1972, I went to military service and after returning, left for St. Petersburg. I lived in that city, married there, and my child was born. In 1988, when the Karabakh War started, I returned to Azerbaijan for participating in the war and defending my parents and nation. Arriving, I saw that my parents were discharged from Khankendi. Parents lived in Shusha and my elder brother lived in Khojaly.
In 1992, when the Khojaly tragedy happened, I studied at 6th class of secondary school. Every evening, Khojaly was shelled with rockets. People concealed themselves in cellars and concreted premises, but we did not have appropriate places for hiding ourselves. We had two-storied house, and when the rocket shelling started, we went downstairs and stayed there. In mornings, we were going to school, and everybody was dealing with own works.
I am an alive witness of the Khojaly genocide, deemed as one of the most bloody tragedies of the 20th century. At the night from 25th to 26th of February, the Armenian armed forces attacked Khojaly from 4 sides of the city. As our house was situated in the upper part of the city, our family took shelter at my aunt's home, located on an edge of the Baku-Shusha highway. It was about 10:30 p.m. Khojaly was exposed to bombardments from cannons, tanks, APCs. People were embarrassed. We were at our aunt's home, but my brother and husband, as everybody, were at the post situated in the upper part of the city, close to our house. We entered the Ketik forest. Gargar River flows through that part of Khojaly, and it was difficult to pass that river. My husband took my mother and me on his back and took across the river for our feet not become wet.
The perplexed people passed the Gargar River through the water, and in several hours their feet became frozen.
Üstündən neçə saat keçməmiş ayaqları hamısının donmuşdu.
Mən də 3 uşaq, bir iki
I was with
qoca.
3 children and 1 old woman.
Rəhmətli yoldaşım.
My late father-in-law stayed with my husband at the post, saying that he could not leave without son.
Postlarda dururdular da.
I took my children and mother-in-law and came to my father.
Çıxa bilmərəm.
I asked about my parents, and they said that my parents closed the door and concealed themselves in the cellar. When firing started, they took the child and went to the cellar. We went into the Ketik forest. There is a Gargar river flowing through the forest, and everybody had to pass this river. My youngest daughter was 2.5 years old. I tied her and carried on my back. Firing started when we were in the forest. It was strongly snowing, as if the snow knew that Armenians were tormenting us. My daughter was crying and asking for bread. I said that there was no bread here. If we succeed to pass to Agdam alive, I'll give you bread there. My little child was hungry and wanted to eat.
Babam direndi anama ki, uşaqları
My grandfather insistently required my mother to discharge children
uşaqların da başına gələcək. Anam dedi
because children would be exposed to the events happening to us.
hə, babam
My mother decided to take them to Agdam.
ki, aparmalısan mütləq uşaq.
Grandfather seated us to a helicopter and we arrived to Agdam.
Gəldik Ağdama. Ağdama gəldik.
My
amma
father and
atam,
grandparents
nənəm,
stayed
babam
at
evdə
home.
qaldı. Həmin Xocalı faciəsi
At the night of the tragedy, my grandparents realized that the firings were stronger than those in previous days.
Babam, nənəm görür ki,
Our village was fired from 4 sides.
daha çox atəş açırlar, iri çaplı silahlardan. Dörd bir yandan kəndimizi atəşə tutublar.
Bu Noragöl tərəfdə üzümlük var.
We were shot from machine gun hidden in the vineyard. Me and thrower Rahman Ismailov were ordered to destroy this machine gun. We took the weapon and going there saw a flying Alazan rocket. This lightning rocket was shot as a salute. It was exploded at the distance of 3 or 4 meters of us.
4 metr qabağımızda partladı.
Atışma düşdü. Bu Naxçıvanik
The skirmish started. A new AZ vehicle passed on the Nakhchivanik road. The man said that the vehicle belonged to Armenian forces and they would kill everybody. They were right. As the vehicle passed, the skirmish started. I lost my son at this skirmish. He disappeared. My mother-in-law also got lost. I had no information regarding my husband and father-in-law. They stayed there and didn't come. Passing a long way, I saw that they laid a bloody corpse on the guns and were coming. I asked whose corpse it was, but nobody answered me. It turned out that it was Vagif, my sister's husband. He was shot in Khojalı, in front of his house. The soldiers were carrying him, putting the corpse on the guns like stretcher. They put him on the ground and started to skirmish. He and my son were captured, but I did not know anything about my son.
Mənim oğlumu da götürmüşdülər. Ancaq mən bilmirdim mənim oğlum əsir düşüb.
The inhabitants of the city were already leaving it. Reaching the forest, we saw a crowd there. There was a group from Baku, led by Agil Guliyev. Agil Guliyev was wounded that time. They prepared a stretcher and tried to carry him. Arriving the Gedik forest, I turned and saw that the village was completely burning. There was a fire close to our house too. I told my mother about it. An old and wise man was following us. He said, "If you look back, you will not be able to go ahead. Go and don't turn back."
Bəli, dedi, geriyə baxma. Elə bil o kişinin sözləri də
I maintained that man's words and continued moving forward without turning back.
yoluma davam elədim.
Çıxanda mən gördüm ki,
Leaving the village, I saw that my house was the first burnt one.
yandadılar, onlar
I am from Hankendi, and everybody knew me.
ki, belə bir adam bu işi
They gained an information via reconnaissance and killed my wife and my cousins, Mehmed of Yashar and Nasir of Zahir, in revenge to me.
qohumlarım da, məmərlərim. Məmmədov Yaşar
The latter died during the Dashalti events.
Daşaltı hadisəsində rəhmətə getdi.
He also lived in St. Petersburg together with me, my uncle and Avaz Shahverdiyev. They too and my wife were killed.
Reaching the forest, my father saw that Khojaly was burning and decided to return home to his parents. But Aunt Gumru didn't allow, saying that the village was burning and it was impossible to return there. They continued going through the forest and were lost.
Biraz keçəndən sonra cəmaət
Later, the people realized that there is no way out, no need in waiting.
ölümdür, gözləməsən də, getsən də ölümdür. Deməli o təpənin
Everybody started to move downstairs under the rain of bullets.
getməyə, qaçmağa çalışdı da. Güllə dəyirdi ki,
Somebody was killed, somebody was wounded. In the lowland, I saw that the people whom I saw on the hill were now lying on the ground.
təpənin o tərəfində, təpənin yanında
Firstly, I did not understand the reason, but looking attentively, I saw that their eyes are open, and they were glanced at me. There was a young, grey-eyed woman. I will never forget her sights. She had pink earrings and a child on her arms.
Qulağında da çəhrayı rəngli sırğası var idi. Gördüm belə uşaq da yanında
Later, I understood that she was killed and lying with open eyes.
şəhid olub da, sən demə gözləri ona görə açıq qalıb.
The aid for us arrived only in the morning, and Armenians left away. We arrived at the Yagdam hospital. I saw many wounded people there. Corpses were lying on each other. It was a very terrible sight.
Onu görəndə adam dəhşətə gəlirdi.
Atamgili girov götürürlər.
My father was taken hostage to a farm,
Termiyə gedir ki, bizim kənddən tanıdıqları çox.
and he saw many people from our village there.
Bunlara çoxlu
They were cruelly tortured a lot.
insanlığa sığmayan işgəncələr verirlər. Atama deyirlər ki, gedək sən evini
They said to my
göstər, sənin
father,
yaxşı pulun olar.
"Let's go, show your house.
Papam da bunlara deyir
We think
ki,
you have
"Hə,
much
mənim
money."
pulum da var, qızılım evdə
My
var."
father answered that he had much money and gold.
O fikirlə deyir ki, gedim görüm.
He intended to go home and check whether his parents were alive.
Ona görə də onlara deyir ki, hə, çoxdur, pul da var evdə, qızıl da, hər şeydə. Gəlirlər. bizi
Reaching
qara
our
qara
gates,
satana görə
they saw a big and black lock on the door.
qara
My father said, "Here's my house. Let's get in and I'll show you everything."
göstərəcəm sizə. Deyirlər ki,
An Armenian
"Bu
said
içəri
that they
erməni
could not enter the house
girə bilmərik."
because it already was taken for somebody's own.
Özünə götürübdü.
Mənim qaynata
My father-in-law participated in the Second World War.
Deməli,
Hitler's soldiers could not kill him, but Armenians did. He was killed at home.
evində
And
orada
burned.
bir yerdə yandırıblar. Mən də o
After
uşaqlar,
leaving,
onun üçün
I had accepted many proposals for passing to various battalions, but I didn't agree because I wanted to revenge for Khojaly. Thus, I came to the battalion in Khojaly.
gecə məndən aldı.
I lost my father that night.
Ata sökənliyi dağ.
A father is a support and mountain for his daughter.
Qardaş itkisi.
Only sisters may know what the loss of brother means.
Caman qardaşım
My young brother married a year ago. He was 33 years old. I lost him too.
bir il nə qədər, bir il neçə aydı da. Qardaşımı aldı, qardaşımdan deməli
That night took my dear brother away from me forever.
yanında doğmalardan kimsə yox idi.
He had no relation by him.
Şəhərin qız gəlini çıxartmaq üçün o da Dəras tərəfdə
Fighting for rescuing the women and girls, he also was captured.
oradan əsrlər içindən
Armenians chose 12 or 13 people among the captives, and my brother was one of them. We searched for him for a long time, but I have not gained any information for 30 years.
səsdə hələ də bir xəbər yox.
Bu günə qədər onların taleyindən
Their destiny is unknown till now.
olan heç bir söz deyən olmur ki,
Nobody has seen them.
yəni gördükmü, görmədikmi. Bircə dənə səhər bizim qonşu Şərqiyə xalanın qızı.
We had neighbor Alima. She was Aunt Chergia's daughter.
Demişdi ki,
When we were leaving, they stayed at home until the morning.
çıxmayıblar evdən. Durublar evdən çıxmağa gəlib.
Hearing the fires, they left home and came to us because our house was closer.
Tez giriblər içəri. Erməni
Armenians came following them.
girir içəri ki,
It was
səhər
morning
səhər
and
imiş.
my
Babam
grandparents
evdə
were at home.
saxdılar. Babam
My
xəstə
grandfather
idi,
was ill.
xəstə idi də.
My father was also telling that my grandfather was ill.
Nənəm xəstə deyildi də amma.
Entering home, they found my grandfather lying in the bed
Yerdə yatıb
and grandmother sitting over him.
oturub onun yanında. Ermənilər girir içəri. bunlar
Armenians
bizim
captured
gördü
our neighbors.
qonşunu, uşaqların, anasını bir yerdə götürür. Baba nədir? Nənəm
My grandfather
babam
covered
da
his head with
başına
blanket,
yorğanı çəkmiş imiş.
and they thought that he was a young man. But tracing the blanket with the butt, they found old man there. Grandmother swore Armenians not to touch him because he was ill and sleeping.
Qoca kişidir, xəstədir özdə, yatıbdır. Deyirlər ki, o ermənilər
Our
də
neighbor
bunları demir.
asked the Armenians to
O
capture
qonşu
them
deyir ki,
and
bunları
release on the way.
Bunları əsir tutub, deyib aparıb boşlayacağıq da sizi. Nənəm deyir bizi də apar, bizi də apar.
And my grandmother swore too, but they didn't do it.
Amma nə qədər desə də onları eşidən olmayıb da. Elə evdə də
Armenians captured only neighbors with children.
uşaqları ilə, uşaqlar da balacaydı. Götürüb aparır, əsir götürürlər. Belə.
Consequently,
Ondan
on
öncə
that
də
day of
onlar
February
belə həmin
26,
günü, 26
only our neighbors saw my grandparents.
o qonşu
Later, we had no information about them.
heç bir məlumatımız olmuyor.
I went there but saw that he was not my son. I asked everybody and was answered that the child was taken to Abdal Gulablı. He was approximately 11 or 12 years old. Crying, I sat in a car and went there. Reaching there, I saw that he was not my son. I did not know that my son was captured by Armenians. My sister's husband, wounded Vagif, also was there. Vagif said to one Armenian soldier that this child's parents were killed at his site. His intention was the child's release, but he failed. He had acknowledged Armenian person there, surnamed Pashayan. He told him about the child's parents and noted that he was wounded in the forest, hiding that he was shot at town door. But the child's parents were killed. Pashayan answered, "Don't worry, children will be released." He was bleeding, but nobody gave him water.
Allah'ın bir suyu nədir? Qan getmiş adam, qan itirmiş adama su vermirlər.
He asked a lot, but the child wasn't returned. Allah verdi, Bağırov brought my child. It was 3 o'clock at the night. We dwelled in Ağdam, at our relative's home. Everybody was sleeping. I was surprised, not understanding how they could fall asleep. They were sleeping, but I was waiting for my child. Suddenly, I heard the gates being knocked. "Who is there?" I asked. They asked, "Is it Saleh's house? We need Rubaba. Tell her that I brought her son." I really do not know how I left the home, ran towards the gates, and opened them.
I only could realize that they were captured.
My father stayed in the forest for 2 nights. He was found frozen and brought to Agdam. My sister and husband were together with him. My father went to military service a year before the war and returned a year after its end. He was wounded when returned. When he regained consciousness, he said, "I have been in wars for 4 years, but I have never seen such cruelty from the German fascists against the peaceful inhabitants."
Benim yoldaşımın da
My wife's life was as fatal as her parents' once. Her brother was brought down by train and died. Her mother was brought down by a car. I gained information that she couldn't stand the grief and hung herself. But I am not sure. I say only what I have heard.
He took his father and entered the forest. Here he saw that his father is suffocating. His blood pressure increased. His father said, "Son, leave me and go away. I am an old man and know these places very well. Go and find your family. I will follow you when I get better." But he could not come. We could not bring and bury my father-in-law.
Yolu gələ bilmədi, qaynətam da elə orada şəhid oldu. Ancaq qaynətamı gətirib bastıra bilmədik, dəfn eləyə bilmədik.
Until his death, my husband was saying, "What kind of son I am if I could not find and bury my father's corpse?" My husband died leaving these loads on my shoulders. My brother-in-law's 2 children stayed with his wife. My husband said, "I opened the door and called Nazim and Mahbuba, but they were absent. We had waited for them for 30 years. My brother-in-law is exhausted waiting for them and dreams a death for seeing his children. My 2 cousins died at the same time. Alif Hacıyev is my cousin. He was shot by sniper in the forest. His brother Süleyman was captured in the village. He was not released because of being Alif Hacıyev's brother. My uncle, Alif Hacıyev's father, had been in captivity for 3 months. I cannot describe his state when he returned. I wish nobody of our nation gets exposed to such a tragedy.
Görmesin ay Allah. Biz görmüşük, hiçbir cemaatim, milletim görmesin onu. İşine gün de geldi. 3 ay əsirlikdə olan yaralı vurmuşdular, üstü başı qan.
He was wounded and slaughtered. His clothes was in blood. Speaking to the people leaving the village, they said that my father was grieving for my brother. My brother was one of the persons leaving the village at the last moment at 5 o'clock in the morning. He knew that we were at my aunt's home, but coming there, he found nobody.
Bilirdi ki hamımız oradayıq da. Gəlib ora görübdü ki, daha heç kəs yox.
مش هسمح لك تبقى كرامتي وسيلة رخيصة للتعبير. لو حتى قلبي تاه، لو حتى يصرخ لو حتى قلبي تاه، لو حتى يصرخ طول ما بينا حياة، طول ما بينا حياة. قلبي رافض يسمعن، قلبي رافض يسمعن، قلبي رافض يسمعن. سيدي يا سيدي يا سيدي يا سيدي تبت يا سيدي. سيدي يا سيدي يا سيدي يا سيدي تبت يا سيدي.
Oradan biz çıxanda
When we left the village, my mother-in-law said to close the doors and take the keys. We asked, why do we need the keys? We still keep these keys. She said that we would return home. Our house was two-storied. We closed the doors upstairs and left the downstairs open. My father-in-law was downstairs. His last words were that he would not leave the home until Ali's return. He obliged us to leave the house. Yildirim came and said that the Armenian fighters had entered the village. He said he was old and if he would be killed, he would die at home. Later my husband returned and took his father to the forest. A war is a terrible thing. It has unwritten rules. A fighter in a war should fight against another fighter. But the events happening in Xocalı were a genocide. Adult people, women, children were killed due to their being Azerbaijanis. It was a real genocide caused by the Armenians against the inhabitants of Xocalı.
Yəni bu əsl soyqırım idi. Ermənilər tərəfindən Xocalı əhalisinə qarşı törədilmiş. Xocalılar torpağını qoyub getmək istəmirdi və həmin
The inhabitants of Xocalı did not want to leave on lands, their houses constructed owing to their long years' works. Making a step, they turned back and looked at Xocalı. They looked at their houses left there. When I turned back, an old man following us said, "If you look back, you will not be able to go ahead. Go and don't turn back."
Chief of the project Sariya Jafarova, Director Murad Adiloglu, Editor Farid Abuzer, Operator Mugabil Bedirkhanov, Cutter Elmar Mamadov, Musical Design Mirgamar Mansimova.